Welcome everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you for joining me for the best albums of 2020 countdown. We've got 20 albums for 2020 that I'm going to run through, but before we go any further, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button for me. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, you'll stay up to date on all things going on in the world of music, just like this, where we're going to count down the top 20 best albums of 2020 here. So you'll see behind me here, I've got a bunch of box sets from 2020. I also did a best of 2020 for the box sets. I'll leave a link in the description below this video. You can check that out. For the criteria for this, it was pretty simple. Of course, the album had to be released during 2020. And it had to be new studio album of original material. So no live albums, no cover albums, no compilations, no anniversary or reissue albums, and of course no box sets. So only albums of new studio original material were considered for this. Now back in June, I posted a video for the best albums of 2020 so far. I'll also put a link in here in case you want to check that out. But my top two contenders at that time were for DeYoung, 26 East Volume 1 and Black Swan, Shake the World. So, if you've been following along, keep an eye out for the placement of those in the list here. But of course, with more than 6 months more of releases that have come out since that time, anything can happen. All right, I got two honorable mentions I want to call out here. So Richie Kotzen put out a really great solo album called 50 for 50. 50 tracks were recorded for this for his 50th birthday, all brand new songs, all 50 tracks of those. Really good stuff if you're a fan of his or the other bands he's been part of, like Poison and Mr. Big. And then Testament, Titans of Creation, fantastic classic thrash album by the metal veterans there. Really good stuff. Just missing the cutoff point here. All right, so kicking things off, number 20, Puscifer, Existential Reckoning. Now I know this one's going to be a controversial one just because of who the band is, but it features Tool and a Perfect Circle frontman, Maynard James Keenan. This is his art rock side project, and it just really hit me right. The band has a sound that is a synth-laden electronic art rock kind of a sound, and this one here in particular, very 80s feel to it, like Depeche Mode type music on it. But again, this one here, their fourth album, really good stuff. Coming in at number 19, Dukes of the Orient, Freakshow. So this band formed in 2017 out of the ashes of the prog rock supergroup Asia. And John Payne was the singer and bassist for Asia for 15 years, from 1991 until 2006, when the original band reformed at that time. And so this band here, Dukes of the Orient, also features keyboardist extraordinaire Eric Norlander. Really amazing keyboardist. And I would say fans of Yes and Rick Wakeman should really check out this band here, Dukes of the Orient. Okay, coming in at number 18, Reb Beach, View from the Inside. So he's the guitarist for Winger and Whitesnake and newly launched band Black Swan, which I mentioned at the beginning of this, and they're going to be appearing later on in the countdown. This is his second solo album. It's been 19 years since his first one, Masquerade, which came out in 2001. However, this one here is an instrumental guitar shred style type album, and it has similar sound to the aforementioned bands that he is part of. All right, number 17, Alcatrazz, Born Innocent. It's been 34 years since this band has released an album, all the way back in 1986. Graham Bonnet, lead vocalist and frontman, is now 72 years old, but he sounds as amazing as ever. Don't know how, but he does. And the guitar role goes to the capable hands of Joe Stump. Interesting note, original guitarist Steve Vai actually contributes one track to this that he wrote and provided to them. So there's a whole family affair going on with this. All right, coming in at number 16, Smashing Pumpkins, Seer. This here is their 11th studio album. It's actually referred to as a double album. It's the follow-up to 2018's reunion album, Shiny and Oh So Bright, Volume 1. This one here is actually considered the second part, or Volume 2. And it's a very synth-laden 80s sounding album, much like Joy Division. Okay, coming in at number 15, we've got Soul Asylum, Hurry Up and Wait. This is their 12th studio album, and it doesn't stray too far from their formula. Sonically very similar to their 90s sound and beyond. Essentially it has become, or the band has become, a solo project or solo vehicle for frontman Dave Pirner, who's the only original member at this point in the group, but still really good stuff being put out by them. Okay, number 14, Pearl Jam, Gigiton. This one here is the 11th studio album by the band, and it's their first one in 7 years since 2013's Lightning Bolt. And this album here has got a much rawer sound to it. It's varied in style and more experimental than their last couple of releases. One of my things with this album was that it has more of a feel of demos to it than their more pristinely produced albums of late. So just keep that in mind when listening to it, but very good stuff nonetheless. Number 13, Blue Oyster Cult returns with The Symbol Remains. This is their first album in 19 years, and it's the follow-up to 2001's Curse of the Hidden Mirror. Now, original members Buck Dharma and Eric Bloom are still on board here, and it's a very strong release for these guys that have now been around more than 50 years. All right, number 12, Ozzy Osbourne, Ordinary Man. This album here is his first album in a decade since 2010's Scream. The Prince of Darkness on this is sounding as good as ever. There are a few classic sounding Sabbath tunes on here, but the rest of it is typical Ozzy solo sounding material. The band for this is pretty interesting. We've got Andrew Watt on guitar. He comes from California Breed. He's also producer and co-writer on this. Along with Duff McKagan of Guns N' Roses and Velvet Revolver, he's on bass, and Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Chickenfoot on drums. So interesting band playing with them on here. And as a little side note, he's actually back in the studio with Andrew Watt again, already working on a follow-up album. So good thing we are not going to have to wait 10 years. Okay, coming in at number 11, Paul McCartney, McCartney 3. This just came out this past Friday, December 18th, but it is that good, already joining my list here. So following on from McCartney 1, which came out in 1970, and McCartney 2, which came out in 1980, this album similarly was recorded all by Paul as a one-man band sort of a thing, and it was done during lockdown, or as he likes to call it, rock down. So it's a much rawer type album than his typical, more pristinely produced albums, but it still holds all the classic elements that make him an icon, and I highly recommend this album if you are a McCartney fan. Okay, coming in at number 10, we've got Udo, We Are One. This album here, it's a new studio album, but it's recorded with a full orchestra as a collaborative effort. So the orchestra wasn't just added at the end. They actually wrote together as a band effort here. It's a concept album about global warming and the state of the world. Cool thing is the album actually includes former Accept members Peter Baltz on bass and Stefan Kaufmann on drums, and they co-write a lot of this here. Coming in at number 9, Vandenberg 2020. This is their first album in 35 years. The album is much in the vein of their debut album, and like all of Adrian Vandenberg's projects, this one here very much has a White Snake sort of sound to it. The album features the stunning vocals of Ronnie Romero, and the cool thing is this album also has a re-recording of the 1983 hit Burning Heart. You get to hear that with Ronnie Romero singing it. All right, coming in at number 8, first one that I was saying to keep an eye out for, Black Swan, Shake the World. This one here, the band is a super group. They consist of Robin McCauley from MSG on vocals, Reb Beach from Winger, Dokken, and Whitesnake on guitars, Jeff Pilson from Dokken and Foreigner on bass, and Matt Starr from Mr. Big. And so many great rock elements coming together to form the sound for this group. It's got a very classic MSG style sound to it, and everyone in my opinion is really bringing their A game, especially vocalist Robin McCauley and guitarist Reb Beach. Those guys just really put this album over the top in my opinion. All All right, number 7, Kansas. The Absence of Presence, one of my favorite titles of the year. It's their 16th studio album, second album featuring new vocalist Ronnie Platt. And in my opinion, easily their best work since the 1980s. And for me, it surpasses their 90s output, as well as the reunion album from 2000. And it even surpasses the last album. I really just feel this is a superb album done by the band. Okay, coming in at number 6, we've got Rick Wakeman and the Red Planet. Just want to quickly show you this. There is a full unboxing of this, but just cool thing that this album did. So it was recorded with the English rock ensemble band. It's an instrumental prog rock album about the Red Planet or Mars. And it's a return to the heavier keyboard sound, but it's still orchestrated in nature. And just in my opinion, again, a real superb return to form for this guy. Okay, coming in at number 5, the other album that I mentioned to keep an eye out for, Dennis DeYoung, 26 East Volume 1. So yes, that means that 4 other albums took over the top spot, which we'll get to in just a moment. This album here, though, 13 years since his last studio album, and it's really got a breathtaking sound and range in terms of the scope of it. It covers rock, sampled beats, 1960s pop, orchestration, rap, pomp, and prog rock, all mixed in together here. Of course, if you know Dennis DeYoung, you know that he does that sort of stuff very well. Don't be put off by any of those genres. Vocally, very much in the vein of Styx. He's got a very classic old sound to it. Lyrically, though, it's a politically charged album, though, but a lot of tongue-in-cheek with it as well. Okay, in at number 4, Bon Jovi 2020, another very politically charged album. This one here is the follow-up to This House Is Not For Sale, which came out in 2016. It's their 15th studio album overall. And the original release of this was pushed back due to COVID-19. And in that time, John Bon Jovi actually wrote 2 more songs to it. Then he shuffled the songs that he chose to put on it, dropping 2 songs and changing the running order on it. So what was eventually released was a very timely album and completely immersed in the events of 2020. And in my opinion, it's what brings it in at number 4. Although again, I know that album in and of itself has been very controversial, and a lot of people are probably going to object to its number 4 positioning here. All right, so we're down to the top 3 here. Coming in at number 3, we've got Deep Purple and Whoosh. This one here, you know, pioneers of heavy metal themselves return with their 21st studio album. The release was also pushed back due to COVID-19. The band has been around now 52 years, if you can believe that, and they've made one of their best albums in their entire career, in my opinion. No, it's not going to replace, you know, the 1970s output like Machine Head, but this is some really good stuff, especially for a band that's been around as long as they have. All right, coming in at number 2, Bruce Springsteen, Letter to You. This is his 20th studio album, and first with the E Street Band since 2014's High Hopes. It was recorded back in November 2019, so prior to the pandemic. The whole thing was recorded live with no overdubs, so making that pretty interesting. And the theme of this album is about facing mortality, which is kind of understandable given that Bruce is actually 71 years old now. But really, really interesting lyrically and song stylistically on it. Do check it out. All right, coming in at number 1, I don't think it's any surprise, especially if you've noticed the shirt that I'm wearing here. AC/DC Power Up. First new album by them in 6 years since 2014's Rock or Bust. Brian Johnson is back with the group. He's 73 years old, but he's sounding as good as ever. It's the 11th studio album with Brian Johnson on vocals, and the sound, of course, is what you'd expect, just straight ahead, chugging rock and roll. But there's a lot more melody, in my opinion, on this one here, like their best stuff out of the 80s and early 90s. All right, so in closing, a lot of great bands returned this year. Some of these bands 20, 30 years between releases or since their last album. Because of this, I think that music was the all-time winner of 2020 here, saving us from COVID and just the awful year that 2020 was. Don't worry though, 2021 is looking to be just as good musically. There's a lot of things in the pipeline, a lot of bands in the studio, as I mentioned. Deep Purple already back in the studio, Ozzy back in the studio. So a lot of groups that we've got albums from this year could very well be putting out new albums in 2021 as well. We'll have to wait and see. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. Give me your list. Let me know what you think the number one should have been. I'm sure you'll have different opinions. I'm sure there's even probably an album I left off by accident. I'll kick myself later for when you remind me of it. All right, everyone take care. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all real soon. Bye-bye.